Hi, everyone. It's Joe Chadburn, the Ambassador Network Director here at World Missionary Press. I am with Lacy Wheeler. This is my first time meeting him face to face via video, and he's a missionary to Mexico and good friend of World Missionary Press. Welcome, Lacy.
Hey, it's good to be here, Brother Joe, and talk about getting the gospel around the world.
Amen. Yes, sir. So tell us a little bit about yourself. I hear that wonderful Southern accent. I lived in the South most of my adult life. So tell
Yeah.
us a little bit about yourself, brother.
Well, I'm Lacy Wheeler, and I was born and raised in Greenville, Tennessee, East Tennessee. It's along the mountain, the Appalachian, and we were tobacco farmers and we were dairy farmers. But we've repented of our tobacco growing. there,
I pastored in Eastern North Carolina for many years, so a lot of my salary came from tobacco money. I will say that. So I understand.
Well, growing up, as a kid, they had a little crib at the end of the tobacco patch. But then when I got old enough, it was like forced labor. So we got to work. And then when I got older, I started growing it myself. And then I made a lot of money. But, I got convicted. I got so convicted about it. It was like a gateway drug for people. And then also, I just know it's bad for your health. And so
Yeah,
God,
mine was, for clarity, was retired tobacco money, but it's really prevalent in
yeah.
that region as well.
Yeah. Well, when I did quit, I finally graduated from high school and went to work in a factory. And when I was there, a good friend of mine came by, and this was in 1994. He asked me if I want to go to Russia. I heard I'd been out of the county, but I went home and I couldn't get away from that. And so I came back and I said, I've got to go to Russia with you. And so we went to Russia, and they were standing in line just to get any of the gospel or a free Bible. And they had these little boxes, and they were World Missionary Press boxes of gospel tracts, and that was 29 years ago. And so we give those out. It's the first time I've ever ran across the World Missionary Press, but I didn't really think much about it being young and just getting started. I was just a layman in the church. Anyway, when I came back from Russia after that trip, I worked with the migrants along the river, the Nolichucky River. And then the Lord allowed me to go to a Bible college in Greenville, South Carolina. And then we went to Mexico after I graduated. And then I got married. And then we went into Mexico. Now we live about 12 hours south of the border. So we are all about getting the gospel into Mexico and Honduras and Guatemala right now. And then one day we want to do Bangladesh and Pakistan. And
Wonderful.
yeah.
Where'd you go to school in Greenville? Bob Jones?
No, now my wife went to Bob Jones.
She did. Okay.
Yeah. I went to a college across town. It's called Tabernacle Baptist Bible College.
Okay. Gotcha. Is that where you guys met? Did you meet in Greenville?
No, matter of fact, when I went on deputation to go to Mexico, I went down to Columbia, South Carolina, and I met a pastor. Anyway, he told me, he said, "Well, you need to get married." And he says, "I got a girl in a church for you." I said, "Well, I'm not really interested." So anyway, when I got ready to go, and he volunteered to bring the car and follow me out there, but he said, "My daughter's going, and there's another girl going to go with us out of our church. They're going to do some vacation Bible schools and things like that." And so the other girl, 2 years later, I married her.
Okay, so it was Vacation Bridal School as well.
Yeah.
I understand.
Yeah, right.
Very good. Very good. So
Yeah.
it sounds like there was a defining moment in your life, and it sounds like what happened on your trip to Russia really piqued your interest in missions. Is that right?
Oh, yes. I believe everybody take a missions trip because it's going to open up your eyes. It's going to give you a heart for world evangelism. And so it certainly changed my life. And when I come back from Russia, we started going to the fairs and the festivals and all of that, giving out gospel tracts. We'd stand outside the gates and stuff like that. I never did do that before. I was never taught, never shown. When I first went to Russia, they gave me a big stack of tracts and they put me outside the subway in Moscow. And they said, just say, "Это брак бесплатно." They said, "This is free. It's a gift." So I did that. And So that's my first experience of giving out tracts. So I came back and
Wow.
we just started giving out gospel tracts, and I got a heart for literature from that trip. We actually rented 2 train carts, and we went from Moscow all the way down to South Siberia. Took us 2
Wow.
weeks, and we loaded down with World Missionary Press boxes, thousands of those. So we went all across Russia, and it just changed my life, and I was 20 years old at the time.
So how did that work? We want to talk about Mexico, but I'm intrigued about
Yeah,
this Russia thing. Now,
yeah.
you're on the same train for 2 weeks?
Yes, with the group that I was with, they rented 2 train carts, and there were sleepers.
Hmm.
And so we would go from Moscow and we would go to the next biggest town.
Hmm.
So, but we're so overloaded, they would not let us put any more literature on there. So once we got to the next state, we had a truck to meet us and we reloaded. And so sometimes they would unhook our 2 crane carts, put it to the side, and we would go into the city and we would give out thousands and thousands of literature. And we would spend a night in a hotel, and then we would load back up on the train. They would hook us up and they would take us on down to the next town. It was interesting.
That's
It
pretty
really
cool. That really is. Well, that was some adventure for your first trip outside of the country. That's
is.
for sure.
All the way down through there, I would stand at the window. You would throw them out the window,
Hmm.
and people would be standing there. And one time I threw one, and the guy caught it right in his hand. He went right in his hand
Were the
all
Russian
the
people
way.
very receptive to the literature?
Oh, yes. They would stand in line. I don't know about how it is now.
Yeah.
But I will tell you a story. When I went to mission field and I was here in Mexico, I needed a Bible warehouse. But anyway, that same church that I went to Russia with 29 years ago, they built a church across the road, and they sold me their old building for almost nothing. God gave that to me. And
Hmm.
but I went down in the basement and I found 7 boxes of World Missionary Press.
Hmm.
Um, and so they were in the basement. So I brought them up and I laid them out on the floor, and they were Russian. And I was like, I don't know anybody who speaks Russian. But
Hmm.
anyway, I prayed and asked the Lord if he would allow me to some way to get these into the people that speak Russian. So those tracks were in the basement for 27 years. And then I found a guy who had a Russian Bible Society in Asheville. So I made an arrangement with him. I told him I had some Russian tracks. Could you use them? And he said yes. And so we made an arrangement with them. And the week before we were supposed to deliver him, he passed away with COVID.
Oh.
And so anyway, we had a meeting here in Mexico, and we're praying for how we can get more gospel into Ukraine and get around the world and things like that. And there's another missionary who called me. He said he shipped 2 pallets of blankets to Ukraine. And I asked him, well, how did you do that? And he said, well, there's a church out of Greenville, South Carolina, sending containers right into Ukraine. And so I called the guy, the pastor, and I knew the pastor. Matter of fact, they support me. I said, I've got 7 boxes of World Missionary Press tracts. Could you do some Russian tracts? He said, oh, you better believe it. And I said, well, I've got about 4,000. So anyway, we sent that down to Greenville, South Carolina. They put it in the container, and it's been given out now in the Ukraine to the Russian-speaking people there.
Wow. Do you have any idea how long they were there in Mexico?
Well, they weren't in Mexico. They were in Johnson City,
Oh,
Tennessee.
that's where the booklets were. That's where the Russian booklets were.
That's where the Russian booklets were. They were down in
Okay.
the basement of this old
Okay.
church that I built.
Okay.
And
Okay.
so anyway, because I have to have a warehouse there, and then we pile everything, and then we send them to Mexico, and
Gotcha.
with me here. And so how that works is that I get literature and tracts and Bibles and stuff from different people, different ministries, and how I got to using World Missionary Press gospel tracts. I haven't been in touch with World Missionary Press for a long time. Anyway, so I'm gathering all my material, but I'm lacking
Mhm.
gospel tracts.
Mhm.
And I had a friend, he says, well, there's a ministry called World Missionary Press. And I said, I haven't heard of World Missionary Press for a long time. Yeah, I used to use those in Russia years ago. And so anyway, he says, well, there's some, and me being a missionary, I don't have a lot of money. He says, and they'll even pay for it. And he said, well, I can get you 200,000 probably. I said, 200,000. Wow, that'll be a blessing. So anyway, he calls up there and he was able to contact. And then I called up there and I talked to a guy and he says, yeah, we think we can help you out. I said, well, that'll be a blessing. So anyway, they sent them down to the border of Texas and in Mexico. They call it the Valley. So he sent it to my friend, Jack Ferguson. He received them, and then he put all the 24 pallets on a truck. So they brought the truck across the river, picked up all the pallets, and then they shipped it here, dead center, Mexico. So I got all of these World Missionary Press tracts for the first time. I said, man, this is good. So anyway, I began to tell the people, see, people don't really understand about Mexico. Mexico is a huge country. And we have a distribution center here. There's 32 states in Mexico. In the world, there's about 195 countries. And as far as population, do you know the population of Canada? It's
I do not.
39 million. 39 million.
Mm-hmm.
Mexico has 132 million.
Well, I don't like cold weather, so I can understand that.
Yeah. Well, what I'm getting at is out of the 195 countries, Mexico, as far as in population, is ranked number 10.
Wow.
Number 9, yes, number 10 in the world. And number 9 is Russia.
Now, I wonder if the, migrant flow from the rest of Latin America has anything to do with that. Are those people counted in, or are these just citizens?
No, they're not counted in. And
those aren't even counted in, so it's higher than that.
Yeah, then all the ones from Mexico going to the States hasn't affected. No, it's still growing.
Yeah.
So there's a great need. People don't really understand that. Honduras is 9 million. Guatemala has, I think, it's around 16 million. And so you can put all the Central American countries together, and it still wouldn't be anything as the size of Mexico.